So here we are, sunrise on Copacabana Beach in Rio in Brazil. Let's talk a little bit about the Brazilian medical market. So it's one of the 10 biggest medical markets in the world. Something like $13 billion, just enormous. About half of that's going to be domestic. And of course the domestic manufacture. And about $25 billion in pharmaceuticals. We're a 200 million person population here with a growing GDP. So what are some of the things that really characterize the Brazilian market and differentiate from other places? For years it had very strong domestic manufacturing. It's still, you could say, depending on how you look at it, one of the 6 or 10 biggest manufacturers of medical devices in the world. But what you're going to see as a trend is even the government hospitals and the very best private hospitals are going away from local manufacture. A lot of that's being exported to other South American countries, and a lot of it's being used in hospitals, but the competition from higher end international manufacturers, American, German, Japanese, is becoming a little rougher on the local market. So they are more inclined than they were, say, 10, 15 years ago to import into Brazil and for you to get into those good hospitals. When I started selling in Brazil, the last product I was selling, hospital communication systems, when I started, the average price per bed that people were paying was about $40, $45. And we actually got to the point where people were paying us more than $1,000 a bed for our systems. So we were really able to get the market to produce more and more money, to pay more and more money for better quality products, not necessarily across the board, but in a substantial portion. And when you're dealing with a 200 million person market, if you can get that 10% or 15 or 20% of the higher end, that's nice money. As part of that characteristic, it's one of those places, maybe the real iconic place around the world where you have a growing middle class, okay? So a lot of people who a generation ago were poor are now becoming more middle class, which also means you have the second largest private sector healthcare market in the world after the United States. So even though there's excellent public health care here, and really if you go visit the clinics that service everybody, you'll see they're really excellent, a lot of people still want to go to private clinics. So you have an interesting thing where every kid here could get vaccinated by the government, but it's probably the biggest private vaccination market in the world in terms of private vaccination clinics. So that kind of thing. It's products that are sold to a growing middle class do very well in Brazil. Products that are sold to hospitals that are going from basic care to better care do very well in Brazil. Aesthetic medicine, cosmetic surgery, aesthetic dental work, all these things, Brazil is just about the biggest market in the world for those. Plastic surgery, cosmetic dentistry are huge here, and things that sell into that market can be very attractive and very successful. It's a difficult market to work in terms of regulatory. There are attempts to try and keep people out and to control the market. The local FDA and Visa is more likely to stop you on commercial national reasons than a lot of other places, although it's gotten a lot fairer and a lot faster. It used to take as much as 5 years to get registration. Now typically you can get it in 6 months. Like a lot of places, you have to be careful of your distributors, because if your distributor owns that registration, you're going to have to buy it back from them if you ever want to change distributors or end a relationship. So you got to consider a relationship as being very, very long-term when you work with a distributor in Brazil. Here. You have to be very careful when finding a distributor here. I personally, the one time in my life that I worked for a company that was majorly cheated was in Brazil, where we shipped to a distributor who essentially disappeared with our goods. This was almost 20 years ago. So you really want to make sure that you're backing everything up with an LC. You don't want to find yourself working your way through the court system in Brazil. There are lots and lots, thousands of good distributors here. I would just check to make sure that you're working with one that you can trust and that has the right people on the ground. Brazil is a federation, so you actually have the federal Ministry of Health, then you have each state's Ministry of Health, and then you actually have a Ministry of Health for each municipality. And some different types of healthcare are given at the municipal level. The municipalities run and own the clinics. The states do a lot of the transportation, the logistics, the other larger things, and then the federal government, in a lot of ways, does things more like regulatory and deciding on strategy, etc. So you want people who can deal. If you're dealing with a distributor, you want a distributor who can deal with more and has relationships and experience with more than one state of Brazil. Somebody who's really focused on one state of Brazil probably isn't going to give you the type of coverage you might want. You might want somebody who has a little bit more. What I've also found is it's not uncommon for a distributor to be very strong in one state and then have relationships with distributors in other states and work with them there. So they have sort of a sub-distributor network in the areas that they aren't as strong in. Remember, when you're ready to grow your international sales, reach out to us. We can help.
When you decide it's time to grow your international sales, call us.